I'd like to get started. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Tonight's our last class, our last session of this class. It is not our last session forever, which is a nice segue into our suggestions for future study. And hearing kind of what we talked about in the last session and previous, and thank you, Sandy, for putting that up.
There we go.
And we had talked about studying perhaps the Talmud. And please bear with me as far as the choices I selected. I think The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Talmud was something that Rabbi Bernie Gerson had suggested. So that was an easy one to find. I was not certain about the Pirkei Avot. Did I say that correctly? Pirkei Avot?
Yes.
Wait.
And I found
Pirkei Avot.
Pirkei Avot.
Like Pirkei.
Pirkei Avot.
That's it. That's it.
I found something on Amazon, and then we also talked about the Shema, and I found another reference. And I will say at the outset, whatever we choose, I am not going to lead it because this is way outside my ken, and we'll have to talk about if we choose any one of these three or another choice. I'm hoping we'll get some help from maybe Rabbi Sandy or someone.
Well, somebody wanted Rabbi Gerson, so I didn't start up with the Rabbi Sandy because you had mentioned Rabbi Gerson, and Leslie had. So I thought, well, let's move ahead with what you'd like. That's fine.
Well,
It depends on what we choose.
Oh, hi, Leslie. Yeah. But I mean, the Talmud thing, that was fine. I whatever.
Well, and I haven't talked. I've been in the classes. I wasn't there last night, Leslie. Sorry, I was in Arizona. But I haven't talked to Rabbi Gerson about the possibility of teaching it. But he's doing his own thing, and I'm not if that's the consensus of the group, I will reach out to Rabbi Bernie. But
Gordy, I think that he's a wonderful teacher, and I would love for him to teach anything, that we select, particularly if we need a teacher, if it's Talmud.
Okay.
If we're going to study Shema, or if we're going to study Pirkei Avot, now the book that you selected is kind of an introduction to Pirkei Avot. It's not actually the study of Pirkei Avot, which actually would be a good place for us to start. So I think it depends on what we select as our next subject matter, as to then looking for a teacher, or depending on what it is, we may, if we feel really ambitious, we may try to teach it among our class members, at least some of it. Well, I'm talking about the Jewish class members. Okay, I'm not putting that on you, Gordy. But I've studied Pirkei Avot, and so has Paul, and so has Ann, and so has, I'm sure Joe, and others, enough to be able to maybe this person take one chapter and this person take another chapter, and like that.
Great.
If we choose to do that, since we don't actually have a member of our clergy or a member of our teaching staff at Rodef as part of this class, the way we're blessed with you and Sandy, we have to come up with something other than what we're doing for the Christian texts.
Understood. Thank you, Leslie. That's a good summary. Sandy.
I would love to suggest Abraham Joshua Heschel's work. He's done a lot of wonderful things. The Prophet is a wonderful book, and it's very long. We would have to make selections of chapters in the book. 150-page book that he has, Man's Quest for God, and I love his book, God's Quest for Man, but it is a very long and detailed, very long book and involved. And he's done a wonderful little short book on the Sabbath, which is
Yes, that's a lovely book.
yeah. So anyway, I just want to put
It's a beautiful book. Yeah, the Sabbath.
His name in the mix.
All right. Well, now we have a new entry.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. He is terrific. He's wonderful. I think he writes beautifully and so inspirationally, I think.
It's very.
Who's the author again, Sandy?
His work is very spiritual, and
It really is.
Yes.
Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Heschel, yes. Right? Don't you think, Leslie? You can't go wrong with him.
Yeah, I wonder how his works are from easier to understand all the way to harder to understand. So
yes, and there may be more that you need to understand about Judaism that I didn't realize unless we went back and looked at it. You know what I'm saying?
But if we're going to study the prophets, I think that's a great place to start. It is they are books that we share.
That we share.
And we could take selections. We could either take selections from the book, or we could just continue to study it from one end to the other over a period of time. It just depends on how we decide to do that. If that's the way we want to go.
Well, Leslie, back to your point about Alice. Just a second. Back to your point. If we did the Pirkei Avot, that our Jewish friends would then undertake to collaborate among themselves to take a chapter or something, would that be the same for Heschel's book?
I don't feel that competent in Heschel's book.
Okay.
I think, though, that we could take his chapters, let him be the teacher, and do comments on it, because that's kind of the way we're doing the Isaiah. We just are doing a lot of quotes and lots of opportunity to think about, pray about.
To read it and then have discussion in our class time. Okay. And we could do that.
Any facilitator, I cannot facilitate it. I will be too busy in the spring, so it'll be up to somebody else to facilitate. Alice, you had a
unmute, Alice.
If this is really about all the prophets, I would love to read that book, the prophets, or the one on the Talmud, either one. Happy to do so.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Anybody else? Any other input from anybody else? Well, could I ask?
I would love to hear from our other Jewish members, since I put something out there. When you, those of you who are part of RODEV, when you respond to Gordy's, survey, mention whether or not I've overstepped my bounds and you're not interested in taking a turn, because that's an issue too.
Well, I will suggest, Paul Bogan is not here tonight. He said, whatever you choose to do, we'll do it. So I nominate Paul to lead the class.
If you're not here, you get nominated.
Joe, any thoughts?
Well, I think actually, Leslie and Anne and all of those are gonna carry a lot of weight. They're gonna do well.
Joe, please.
I just, I know that I have not read very much of Abraham Joshua Heschel. He was sort of in the generation ahead of me. But I know that he is, a master of conservative Judaism. He was a conservative Jew. He was head of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, which is the main seminary for conservative rabbis. And he marched with Martin Luther King in Selma. I mean, he was probably, he escaped Europe before the Holocaust, I think. And he wrote in English, I think, and it's not his native language, but he wrote very beautifully. I would, I'm teaching 2 classes myself in the spring. And so I'm kind of like Gordy, but I can take my turn, I guess. But none of us really is trained as a rabbi or trained as a Jewish scholar. I am a dilettante. I dabble in it. And sometimes I can, sound like I know something, especially to a crowd like this, which is also, and I'm not demeaning anyone here, but I'm just saying that all of us are learners. We're not scholars, although I would put Sandy and Gordy in that category of scholar.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
But I think that while they're scholars of Christianity, I'm not sure how much they're scholars of Judaism.
Exactly.
And I don't think we have any scholars of Judaism, much to my embarrassment.
Well, not in this class.
But, we all, and I so much appreciate my Jewish colleagues because you carry the ball for me, but if there is an easy, the Pirkei Avot, by the way, is part of the Talmud. It's in the Talmud. It's a section of the Talmud. But just to study it without some scholarly help would be difficult for me. Are these books by Abraham Joshua Heschel easily readable?
Some of them are. Of course, the Sabbath is really just a little jewel, and easy to read. The prophets go into the history, prophetic history and justice, and the pathos, the philosophy of pathos, and all of that. But then it has the first half of it. It just has anthropology also. The first half just goes into certain prophets, which would be something that each of us could take a prophet, Jeremiah, Isaiah. I thought that his God in Search of Man was just one of the most spiritual things I have ever read. It's a good thick book. It's probably 300 pages or so.
And how long is our next session?
It was a real spiritual adventure for me. Actually, I read that right after my husband died, and it was just such a comfort and such a hopeful thing. So,
do you think as an unscholarly person like me could get a lot out of it, and we could have a fruitful discussion?
Are you kidding me?
And why don't we try it? Why don't we try that? If Sandy recommends it.
Which of the 4? Sandy has mentioned Man's Quest for God, God's Search for Man, correct me if the titles are wrong, Prophets, and the Sabbath. Yeah.
So let's let Sandy choose the one that she thinks is most appropriate for this.
You guys, think it over too.
Well, we're thinking over, but we need to make a decision, and so everybody's planning, and those who are going to lead the class can start working on. And I think, in my experience, it's always helpful to have at least 1 or 2 or more individuals kind of helping to facilitate the class, rather than a free form. I don't think the free form will work.
Sandy, I don't think any of us know. We need to be able to describe the books more, for all of us. I'm sitting here thinking, all right, if I were going to teach this, how would I describe this book? you know, what's the point? Like Joseph Campbell, you know, talks about that. We know what that's about. What is this book about is what I'm trying to
Well,
think.
and why don't I suggest to do this?
The prophets has gotten to be is very very penetrating in all different aspects of analyzing the prophets. So
What do you mean? Say
it's
again.
a pretty
I don't know
deep.
what you mean.
It's a pretty deep analysis. Let me just toss out some of the chapters here.
You say it. Which it are you talking about?
Wait a minute. Let's stop here. We've got a class tonight. We need to get through. So may I suggest, are we in agreement that we might want to tackle Heschel?
Yes.
Yes, that's fine.
And
It sounds
Sandy,
like the Sabbath is easy.
Well, the Sabbath is easy, but I think that we could probably
Yeah.
maybe
That's
learn.
not. We don't need eight
Learn-
weeks for
okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
so could we ask Sandy, maybe you could summarize, and we put out to each of you a brief summary of each of the 4 books, and then you could weigh in, and then whichever comes up first, floats to the surface, we'll go with that.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then Sandy and I and the rest of us can then kind of coordinate with our friends at Rodef Shalom as to kind of how we do this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
And do you think that Sandy Cohen would be something she would go along with us on that?
I think we need to choose a text first before we invite her.
But I just wondered if she's somebody that loves to talk about Heschel. And
Oh yeah, she would. Without even asking her, I'm sure she would.
yes, and she might have an idea too that is.
You could call
good
her.
for
You know, you can.
I will. I'll call her.
No, I'm not because of this, but just to talk. You two are both reverends, and she is a DD, which means for rabbis, after 25 years, it means didn't die. No, it's a doctor of divinity, but they get that after 25 years of being a rabbi. And you know, so you're in the you're kindred spirits in that kind of devotion to what you study and believe, and maybe you can get an interesting feedback from her.
And
Okay.
I'll get some ideas from her too.
That's right.
She may have a
Yes.
a way to approach Heschel that is
Yes.
is good for a group.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Do that.
all right? Well, thank you all for that suggestion. So we will move forward with Heschel, one of the 4 books, and we'll get out information. And to Joe's question, we didn't get a chance to answer that. Joe, I think we seem to have settled on a kind of a 6-week kind of course. However, if the people participating in the study want to go 8 weeks or 4 weeks, we can do that. But 6 weeks, we kind of that seems to be a nice round number. So, and that would start probably in January.
Oh, really?
So after the Christmas holidays, before Lent, which I don't remember when that is, but I think we have plenty of Wednesdays between the first of the year and whenever Lent begins for the Christian.
March 2nd.
Okay, thank you. March 2nd. So we have plenty of time. Okay. Any other thoughts on future study? Great. So tonight we are resuming concluding our study of discussion of Dr. Amy Jill Levine's a Sermon on the Mount, a beginner's guide to the kingdom of heaven. And we are doing her 6th and final chapter. Actually, there's an afterword. And then living into the kingdom. And I guess, Sandy, if you wanted to put up on the screen, and then maybe I'll have some folks read some of the quotes. So in the notes, the quotes are in blue. And the first section, and we're still in chapter 7, we are in chapter 7, of Matthew. And the quote is,
I'm having trouble moving this doggone thing. Let's see what I have to grab.
up at the top. Up at the top. There you
Oh,
go.
that's good. Okay.
And then expand. Can you expand it? Get rid of the other thing. Is it big enough? And maybe you all have notes with
See
you.
if I can get into 200% here, but I'm not seeing the.
You should have at the top the expand the view. Okay, well, let's just deal with that. I think everybody probably has a copy of it. Could I have someone read that Matthew 7:6? Do not give.
Sandy, if you hit that little green dot at the top next to the orange dot or yellow, yeah, if you hit that, it'll expand.
I'll read it.
Well, it just gives us another page. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Leslie, I think you said go
Yeah,
for
I'll
it.
read it. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you.
Thank you, Leslie. Dr.
I'm wondering
Levine,
where that quote came from. I didn't know
Okay.
where it came from.
now you know.
That's right.
And she instructs the readers, that this is an incorrect teaching. I guess there had been some thought that what the dogs refer to is the Gentiles, i.e. the non-Jews in that part of the world in the first century. And in fact, and I will always revert back to Roberta if the Greek is not right, is the term for dog in Greek is kanarion. It sounds a lot like carnivore or
Oh, it is.
okay, great. It really
No,
means
no, it's canine that it sounds like.
canine. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Means really little dogs or puppies, i.e. it's a household pet rather than a mangy scavenger, the dogs that you might imagine out on the city dump or something. And it apparently is a standard ancient insult, much like I think today, you dog is not a nice terminology. And Rabbi, I keep saying it, Dr. Levine refers back or forward to Matthew 15:26, Canaanite women, and I guess these are not Jewish people, but they're Gentile, they're non-Jewish, begs Jesus to cure her daughter of possession, and he answered, and I'll read this, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." And she answered, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." And Jesus answered, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." So what Dr. Levine concludes from that, we can in prayer express what we need to the point of even making demands of God. The assumption being that, or the presumption is that she was asking of God. But Dr. Levine pushes that forward, that we can do that if we need to. And all the disciples are to be a light of the nations, hearkening back to one of our earlier discussions. They are also to manage their resources. They are to be generous and compassionate, but they're not to be stupid, to throw away their resources. They're to be compassionate but be very mindful of what they have.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't understand that. She said, she asked for Jesus to cure her daughter of possession. And his answer is, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. I don't get the connection there. I know I'm maybe dumb, but I don't get it. I don't get the answer following the question or the request.
Sandy or Nina, you want to take that question at all?
This has been it was certainly a dilemma for me when I
Oh, good. Thank you.
was first preaching this. But Jesus was really, as far as I can tell, and Nina, I would be happy to be corrected. But as far as I can tell, Jesus thought, according to Matthew, that
Okay.
that he was there for the Jews. That was his calling, was the kingdom for the Jews.
Okay.
So it was an education. So a lot of us have decided that it was an education for Jesus. That it was that his mission was a bigger world than that. It was the all of the other for the Greeks and for the all of the people that were not Jewish in the in that area. So I think that Nina, do you feel like it was an education for Jesus, that he was being educated?
No doubt. That's true. I'm sure. I think this is just a metaphor too that's used.
But what is the metaphor meaning? What? But what does the metaphor mean?
That may perhaps I don't know what he meant, obviously.
That's what I'm saying. It
perhaps that his healing powers shouldn't be used for other than the Jews. I'm not sure where
Okay, so it's not,
that's
okay.
where I think he was, but yeah.
Okay, so the fact that I didn't get it's not something obvious that I'm missing.
No, but he didn't want to waste that power on somebody that wasn't worthy. So
And he thought that the child maybe wasn't worthy.
well, she wasn't.
Why
As
wasn't
far
the
as he
child
said,
worthy?
she was a dog, right?
She was not Jewish. She was Canaanite. And
Oh.
I understand the Canaanites were the original inhabitants of that land before the Jews came.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, so the daughter wasn't worthy, but then when the mother showed her faith, then she became worthy. The daughter became worthy.
He
And
changed
there
his
are
mind.
Similar stories about the Samaritans, how Jesus, warmed up to them as well. In fact, he decided that maybe the Samaritans were better Jews than he was.
Okay. So that's what you mean that Jesus was learning.
Well, and he changed his mind. I mean, he was.
Or he changed his mind. Okay.
Sure.
Now
Right.
I'm trying to understand. I'm not criticizing.
Yes.
I'm really trying to understand.
No,
here.
I'm just. I think that was a great question, but I think
All right. Thank you.
that's
Thank you.
exactly what was happening. He changed his
Okay.
mind. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't see why Jesus can't be learning. He was a child growing up and he became an adult and a full adult. I mean, he had his human aspect where he was growing, like all humans.
Yeah.
I even explored this story that he was pulling the legs of the disciples that were wondering why he was wasting his time with these non-Jews, that maybe he was pulling their legs. You can read this as humor, because we don't really know what the emotions were in that time and place. And Nan, have you had an insight on this story?
Oh, wait a minute,
No,
Sandy. Kaz had a question before.
Oh, okay.
Well, not a question, but I have this study Bible, and it says here for Matthew 15:26 that children's bread, and they describe it as the lost sheep of the house of Israel must be fed before the little dogs. Christ employed a word here that speaks of a family pet. His words with this woman are not to be understood as harsh or unfeeling. In fact, he was tenderly drawing from her an expression of her faith.
Nice. And Nan, please.
Well, I just wanted to concur that I believe that Jesus was learning about himself and his divinity, and how far should he go, and under what circumstances should he use his healing powers. And so I think he was continually trying to figure that out. And yet I think, Sandy, you're right. I think that there was also a bit of humor, or maybe just his asking his disciples to think it through as well. You don't want to waste, but you also want to honor. And those are obviously things that we are constantly going through in our minds as to how we handle certain situations. And all of the comments, I think, were really appropriate. It does raise a lot of questions. And I, too, didn't think it made a lot of sense to begin with until I remembered that I do believe that Jesus was constantly learning about how he should use his divinity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, knock on the door will be open for you. Can I ask for a volunteer to read Ask and It Will Be Given?
I will, Gordy.
Go ahead, Renee.
Ask, and it will be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds. And for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened.
Another rather common, I think probably most of us have heard this quote. I think Dr. Levine points out sometimes, yeah, that was in Stratesburg, but no, it was also in the Bible in Jesus's words. Not this one, but, and she goes on to explain, well, members of this new kingdom of heaven are to be a light of the world, and they are to help the disadvantaged, but they are not to be taken advantage of, which is kind of back to that previous, be generous and compassionate, but not stupid. Ask and knock. Those are words of invitation. You don't demand, you ask, and you don't barge in, you knock. It's a civility that is missing in earthly kingdoms.
Yeah.
So these are attributes of a heavenly kingdom, asking and knocking, civility. But there is also a boldness the community members possess. They can express their needs to others who will or maybe should answer. The next quote, someone else. Is there anyone among you who?
Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will you give a stone? Or if the child asks for fish, will you give a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him?
The answer to this rhetorical question is, well, of course not. What parent would give his child or her child a stone or a snake? And I think I've read in other translations a scorpion. We know, however, that not all parents are responsible, and raises questions about abuse and neglect. And I was thinking about that. I was just down in Arizona the last couple of days, and I was at not Grand Canyon, Hoover Dam, and there was a parking area, and there was a sign that says, "Please do not leave your pets and your children in your car."
Oh boy.
And I thought, what? But then we all know about people who have left their children in their car for 8 hours or less,
Yeah.
and their pets. And it's like, oh my God, it was stupidness, not really intentional, but any case. In the kingdom of heaven, however, all children are fed. All children, we're children, are fed and loved. And in the kingdom of heaven, all adults are responsible and they're loving. If as God acts, so humanity is to act. And when the community does the divine will, then the community is in the image of the divine. If we who are not perfect can meet our children's needs, how much more will the Father in heaven give good things to those who ask, which kind of raises the question, if you don't ask, are you going to get it anyway?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do to others. Well, now we get to something you all are familiar with, I think. In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, do for you. For this is the law and the prophets. And you all recognize that, right? The golden rule.
Yeah.
It appears in various forms. I was looking this up in most of the world's major religions. And if I understood the entries I was reading on the internet, it may have been coined first among Eastern religions, Confucianism, etc. So I don't know. But here it appears in Matthew. What isn't as clear, or isn't as familiar, I should say, is for this is the law and the prophets. And to what is Jesus referring? Our Jewish friends, of course, know what the law is. That's the Torah. And the prophets are the Nevi'im, which are the former prophets, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Kings, and the latter prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. The third part, the writings of the Tanakh, the writings, the Ketuvim, was still in flux, according to Dr. Levine, at the time that Jesus was expressing these views. So what Jesus is doing is summarizing the scriptures of Israel in the golden rule and the love God and love your neighbor. And the rule never stands alone. It is always accompanied, understood in the context of the rest of the scripture.
Gordy?
Yes.
Can we possibly go back to 11 just real quickly?
Okay, back to where?
Verse 11.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, it says, if therefore you being evil know good gifts, etc. That being evil bothered me for so long, but I'm just sitting here looking at the Greek. It doesn't say you evil. It says you while you are being evil.
Okay.
It isn't a blanket statement of evilness.
Okay.
And the whole thing, Bob, I felt as though Dr. Levine sort of didn't really go into that deeply enough. Jesus calling people evil.
Well,
I'm wondering if that bothered anybody else.
Well, I thought that her description of what that actually meant was more like what you're saying, is that when you are acting evil, da 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 da, not that you are an evil person.
Yeah, that's exactly what the Greek says. When you're acting evil, when you're being evil, not you evil.
Yeah, not that you're an evil person through and through.
Yeah.
Good clarification. I'd actually say when you, who are acting as a human being, as humans normally act, which can be not particularly good, you may or may not want to call it evil, but it's more on the acting rather than inherently evil. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you for that, Roberta.
Yes, absolutely. So, anyway, any other thoughts on the golden rule as far as the law and the prophets? That's what Jesus is referring to as Jewish scriptures. It gets back to the context in which Jesus is instructing his disciples. The narrow gate. Someone want to read the enter through the narrow gate?
Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction. And there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it.
That, rather than the previous verse or verses we read, that seems to be pretty straightforward. The easy path tempts. It is easier to hate one's enemies than to love them. It is easier to be judgmental than to be humble, etc. No one said the path into the kingdom would be easy, but is it worthwhile? Discerning false prophets and bearing good fruit. Who wants to be a false? Who wants to read the false prophet?
I'll read the false prophet because I have a question about it.
Oh, okay.
Is that beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Well, that's a mixed metaphor, but it's all right.
Yeah.
In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. He's talking about hell, I assume. Thus you will know them by their fruits. And my question to this is, so if your child is behaving badly, that's the parents' fault? They're bad fruit and they come from bad fruit?
I don't think he's talking about children.
So you're
Well, yes,
he's taking the metaphor to its extreme.
No,
Right?
the children are the fruit of the tree.
Yes, but I don't think that's what he means, Ann.
Oh, you don't? Okay. All right.
Well, he's talking about people, false prophets, who,
Okay.
they don't practice what they preach. And you will know false prophets by their fruits, not so much their progeny as their fruits of their loin or whatever you want to call it.
But what they preach are their fruits.
Right. They substitute charisma for good works and promises for concrete
Misunderstood.
action.
Okay.
Elizabeth, you have...
May I say something?
No, sorry, Roberto. Elizabeth has her hand up.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to put my hand up with this.
Elizabeth.
I just think for me, it just means that actions speak louder than words.
I think that's good.
It's the person's actions are their fruit. Maybe they do, but it's like, you can't say, it's like people who say, well, that thing that person did was horrible, but that person is still a good person. And it's like, well, that the person's actions reflect the nature of who they are. And so if you have someone who's, saying all these good things, but acting in a way that's cruel or heartless, then you can't ignore that and think that person is still, a good tree.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Roberta, back to you.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted. I didn't know how to do the hand thing. I have heard from, I don't want to get into a evangelical fundamentalist argument or anything here, but I have heard it said by people who are very conservative Christians that Satan's favorite disguise is as a good Christian. And that, if you think about, that just takes to the nth degree the idea of the false prophet, and it causes so much paranoia. I mean, false prophets are laden, the whole idea is laden with the possibility of paranoia.
Okay.
Good point. Good point.
Well, and then the next line, as the Apostle Paul wrote, the fruit of the Spirit, or fruits of the Spirit, are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Yeah.
And I was reading this again. These are words from Dr. Levine. Jesus is condemning those people in his community in the 1st century CE who would deny the teachings of the Torah and the prophets. I don't know who those people are, but he was directing his message at those people, the hypocrites, I guess you could say. And false prophets that continue to arise through the centuries with their false promises. And Dr. Levine concludes, leave the deeds of power, the mighty works to God. Instead, concentrate on welcoming the stranger, especially that guy on the corner with the cardboard sign. Welcome him or her.
Yeah.
Those who say, Lord, Lord. How about somebody to read, not everyone who says to me?
Not everyone who says.
Go ahead, Jerry. Great.
I thought maybe I was muted. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many deeds of power in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you evildoers.
Thank you, Jerry. Rather stern. And what Dr. Levine concludes is confession is insufficient. And this is a Christian thing. Church attendance is insufficient. Memorization of the Bible is insufficient, although she caveats that is, but the pretty immemorable, if you can memorize the Bible. Only the one who does the will of the Father in heaven can enter heaven. And that will, the will of the Father, is the Torah, and understood through Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, and the Sermon on the Mount understood through the rest of the gospel. So how Jesus was interpreting and instructing the disciples is in the Torah and the message in the Jewish scriptures at that time. That he wasn't speaking a Christian message, he was speaking the message of what's in the Jewish scriptures of that time, and instructing his disciples to be light of the world and salt of the earth. And then she cites a verse from the Pirkei Avot, anyone whose wisdom is greater than his deeds or her deeds, to what is he to be likened? To a tree with abundant foliage but few roots. When the winds come, they will uproot it and blow it down. That's kind of one of the other messages from the New Testament is the house built on sand will wash away. That built on rock. Abundant foliage is for show. Looks good, offers little. The deep roots, the firm foundation, derive from knowing the scriptural teachings and acting on them. Continue.
Does Elizabeth have another question?
Oh, yes, Elizabeth, thank you.
Oh yeah, I have a question, and this is just always something that has made me wonder, and I never knew that it came from here. I think somebody else said something about a phrase that I never knew where it came from, but this idea of the salt of the earth being a good thing. I've never really spent time on a farm, but it's always been my understanding that if you put salt on the soil, isn't that what they do so that nothing can grow there?
Yeah.
So how is it a good thing to be the salt of the earth? That's always something that people say when it's like, that's a compliment. And obviously here it's a compliment because Jesus is saying, go out and be the salt of the earth. But doesn't that mean killing everything that grows there?
Well, yes, that's one interpretation, Elizabeth. You were not here on our session where we talked about that. And salt, salt in the ancient world was a medium of it was a currency. In fact, the Roman soldiers were paid in salt, which is the root word of salarium or salary. And salt was very precious in the ancient world, much like a lot of the other spices. So yes, that's interesting. You point out that salt has both the beneficial and the negative consequences. You can salt the earth, and I think we can go back to Sodom and Gomorrah to talk about, the negative consequences of salt.
It's also a preservative on the farm. The farm can preserve meat that way.
Yeah. Teaching with authority. Sorry. Gail?
Sorry, I wanted to say that for our non-Jewish friends, a very traditional thing to bring to someone in a new home, in a Jewish home, is a loaf of bread, a challah or a bread, and salt, like even just Morton's salt or, a thing of salt. And I've done this for years and I always forget why we do it. But it's because you should always have bread or food in your home to welcome others and share food with, and salt that you should always have enough money or wealth. And that's a very traditional thing to take to a Jewish home. bread and the salt.
That's very
Thank
nice. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail, for sharing that.
Can I ask you what verse we're on, please?
We're on Matthew 7:28-29. The next one is, but we were just on.
Oh, could I just go back to 23 real quickly?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. It says, depart from me, you evildoers. And I can't remember whether you brought this up, Gordy, but Dr. Levine brings it up, and it doesn't say you evildoers. It says the ones working from law, or the ones working lawlessness, which brings it right back to the law and the prophets.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for keeping us on the right path as far as our Greek translations, Roberta.
You're welcome.
So the final conclusion of chapter 7, which is the end of the Sermon on the Mount, is, now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as their scribes. And I didn't add any other commentary on that. It sort of kind of speaks for itself, or not.
Authority exousia is a really big philosophical concept in the Greek world. Authority is a really big deal.
Well, and it also betrays or says something about, we thought we knew this guy. Isn't that Joseph and Mary's son? And didn't he grow up in Nazareth? And didn't he, work stone and wood and everything? Where did he get all this authority or this knowledge? Up until then, it would seem that they underestimated the guy, and he founded them. So that ended the Sermon on the Mount, but then Dr. Levine went into an afterword, the kingdom among and within. When people take seriously the Sermon on the Mount, when they conquer their anger, when they love not only their neighbors, but also their enemies, the kingdom is present. Neither Judaism nor Christianity is a finished project, and we can maybe talk about it if you want. Both traditions are looking forward to that messianic age where there's real peace on earth and real peace in the human heart.
Mm-hmm.
Any verse in the Sermon on the Mount can provide entry to the kingdom. The Beatitudes tell us that each of us individually are not the center of the world. I've always concluded I'm kind of the center of my universe, but I think that's a different thing. We are its light and salt. And Jesus affirms the ongoing value of the law, the Torah, and the prophets. The more familiarity we have with these earlier texts, the more we can appreciate the sermon's numerous allusions to them. Look to the intention of the commandments, the mitzvot. Build a fence around the law and around your own life. When you are tempted to do what is not good for you, build fences to help you resist this temptation. And I think that's an important phrase, if I'm not mistaken, in Judaism, on that building the fence, and we can come back to that. We cannot be fully reconciled to the divine if we are not reconciled to each other. Enter into the kingdom. We can not only read back to the scriptures of Israel, we also read forward back to Matthew's first 4 chapters, forward to the rest of Matthew's gospel, and forward into the New Testament. If you let the sermon be your guide, you will not only have one foot in the kingdom of heaven, but also be able to experience that kingdom in your life and in your heart. And I just added, amen.
Amen.
Thoughts? Gail?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I asked this before. How many of you have been to the place where the Sermon on the Mount was given? And I asked this before, but I don't remember how many.
I have.
So maybe almost half of us. I stood there with a Christian preacher who read it, and I'm Jewish, and I stood there with just tears streaming down my face. I thought it was so beautiful and so much a connection for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Other comments? Does this, for both our Christians and Jews, was this an enlightening study of the Sermon on the Mount? I can just say for myself, I always, okay, Beatitudes, yeah, okay, fine.
Oh, yes, very much so.
I learned a great deal. A lot of things I hadn't thought about.
I always do, but what fascinates me is when some of our Jewish friends here ask a question, and it's one of those light bulb moments because it never occurred to me that they wouldn't know that. I mean, that sounds kind of stupid, but I really appreciate the dialogue.
And, and Lindsay, that kind of, in my opinion, sums up our in all of our interactions between Rodef and St. Paul's, St. Luke's.
Pick the right saint, Gordy.
Or pick the right church, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
You got the right one.
Yeah.
But I just love it because it's something I hadn't thought of, and I love to learn.
Well, we're near the bottom of the hour, and I just want to thank all of you, kind of following up on what Lindsay said. It's such a joy to study with all of you, and I learn a lot, looking at things from different perspectives, even looking at things from my own Christian perspective in a different light. And it's, and I'm looking forward a lot to studying Jewish, whether we do Heschel or Pirkei Avot. Well, we're going to do Heschel. Forget Pirkei Avot. Okay, we'll do that later. But Heschel, and get into some concepts that are Jewish concepts that none of us, myself, are familiar with, and we will learn. Sandy.
And if anybody wants to join us and in our discussion of Isaiah, starting on the 28th of November and going the next 3 Sundays after that, you probably have a list of phone numbers, so give me a ring or email me. I would put you on the list and send you the URL and welcome you. So I'm very interested in what our Jewish friends say about this book of Isaiah. So, Anne?
Just to say that I'm having family will still be here for Thanksgiving, and that's the Sunday, Thanksgiving Sunday.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't mean but I'd love to join the rest. Join the other.
I'll put you on the list, Anne.
Thank you.
And Leslie is joining us, I think.
Yes. I'd love to, but good.
Gail, are you raising your hand, joining, or something else?
No, a totally different note, unrelated to this, but I had a preview of the Whistler to Cassette show at the Denver Art Museum. They did a preview for us volunteers. It's absolutely beautiful. It's here till the beginning of March. Don't miss it. It's just
I saw it on Sunday, and it was a wonderful exhibit.
It's just beautiful. Please don't miss it.
Exhibit at the Art Museum.
Thank you.
Don't ask.
Great. Well, thank you all. Have a great evening. Have wonderful holidays.